Hi again. My name is Tarin Clanuwat, and I'm a project assistant professor at ROIS-DS, Center for Open Data in the Humanities, National Institute of Informatics in Japan. And today I will talk about Kuzushiji and Premodern Japanese Studies, Learning Resources, and Artificial Intelligence Initiative. First, I would like to introduce myself. So I got my PhD in the Tale of Genji commentaries from Kamakura period. So Teika was in Kyoto, but I do my commentary research in Kamakura, so it's a little bit different. So I got my PhD from Waseda University in 2018. So I studied Japanese studies, Japanese literature, like most of you here. But then I started my machine learning research in 2017 at the University of Tokyo, Department of General System Studies. Well, how did it happen? Is something like this. One day I just told my academic advisor that, okay, I want to start doing AI. Can I go to University of Tokyo? Something like that. And he just asked me, what? Something like that. But I got out of permission from both university, and that's why I could go to Todai and then start doing the machine learning research. And then after I graduated, I started working at ROIS-DS, Center for Open Data in the Humanities at the National Institute of Informatics in Japan. And then I started developing the KuroNet. Before it wasn't named KuroNet. It used to have like other name, but on the final version that we released as the service, we just call it KuroNet. And then in 2019, I hosted a Kaggle machine learning competition for Kuzushiji Recognition. It's like the competition that people from around the world, they do it online. They can develop the algorithm to solve the Kuzushiji problem. So on the right side is a picture. So I just want to show you what Genji commentaries look like. So in the Tale of Genji, there's the main text. And then on the side of the main text, there's small characters like the explanation. So that is the commentary. So my research is about these small characters. It's very hard to read because it's so small. And it's, of course, everything is in Kuzushiji. And that's how I got into the Kuzushiji world. So what I'm going to talk today is the first thing is about what is Kuzushiji? I will talk about the history a little bit and how you can learn Kuzushiji. And then in the latter half, I will talk about the Kuzushiji recognition with machine learning, that like how the system work. And then I will introduce you the two models that we have created. The first one is a single character recognition. I call it KokumaNet. It's just like backup or something like that because I just named it for fun and somehow it's become official name. And then the next one is KuroNet. KuroNet is the service that we have right now online. And then at the end, I will discuss about the limitations of Kuzushiji recognition system, because if you want to use the service, then you have to know what it can do and what it cannot do. And then I will discuss about the future of Kuzushiji recognition research. So let's start with what is Kuzushiji. Like if you study like Japanese study for a while, you probably know what Kuzushiji is. Kuzushiji is basically a cursive Japanese. It's very vague definition. Like on the left side is a Kuzushiji text. This one is the Tale of Genji woodblock print from 17th century. And then when you transcribe it into modern Japanese, it looks like on the right side. And the process of transcribing Kuzushiji to modern Japanese character, in Japanese, we call it honkoku. So this is the honkoku process. So what exactly is Kuzushiji? From the book called Kakaisho that is written in 14th century, Yoshiji Yoshinari, the author, he wrote about character like this. He said that there are three types of the characters. The first one is the kaisho. Kaisho or shincho. In his book, he wrote it as shincho, but it's exactly the same. So he said shincho is like the person is standing straight, like he's standing still, he didn't do anything. And then when it's go to gyosho, it's like the person is walking slowly. He's just walking. And then when you go to social, it's like the person is running. So you can have like the image of the character like this. So when we look at the characters, anything from kaisho, that is person standing straight and then just like walking and then running around here, that's what we call Kuzushiji. So when we look into Japanese history, like since Chinese character got into this country from maybe 8th century, Japan had been using Kuzushiji for over 1,000 years. So until Meiji period, right? Because everything like written in either Kanbun, Kuzushiji, Hiragana, something like that. But then something happens, and from 1900 to present day, this year, they don't use Kuzushiji anymore. And what is happened between these two part of the time? And that's what they have is the standardization of Japanese language textbook in 1900 is what we call Shogakure. I'll tell you what Shogakure is about. So the standardization of Japanese language textbook. So basically it's the elementary school textbooks. And what they did is that they standardized the whole Japanese language to become more modern. For example, for the Hiragana character, there used to be 12 ways to write Hiragana, and we call this hentai kana because it's like there are so many shapes of the Hiragana. And the reason that they have so many ways to write Hiragana because it's derived from, as you probably know that Hiragana came from kanji, right? And then they use kanji and then manyokana, and then it's become Hiragana, right? So manyokana is like when they write Japanese phonetics with kanji. There's many ways. They didn't set the rule like what character represent which characters. So pretty much something like this. For example, in this slide, ka has 12 kanji represent to it. The manyokana is pretty much the same. And if you ask why Japanese people invented hiragana from kanji, that's because when they use the kanji to represent hiragana characters, when they write a whole thing in manyokana, they have to slowly write the kanji, each kanji as a one hiragana characters. And then, for example, in the modern day, if you write the word konnichiwa or something like that in all kanji, it's very, very tiring and it's very, very slow. That's why they create the shorthand that become the hiragana later. And then, so it's faster and faster. And then we got the hiragana that some of them that become hentai kana today. What they did in the standardization is that 12 ways is too many. Japanese government decided to, okay, let's choose one to represent one hiragana character, which in this slide is ka here. So this is the one that they choose, and they eliminate all other characters that used to be hiragana before. And this is the one reason that why Japanese people today cannot read Kuzushiji anymore. Another thing happened the same way in the kanji. So the standardization of the Japanese language textbook is like this. When you learn kanji in school, they just teach you the one that is closest to the printed typeface. So there are so many ways to write this kanji, the gyo and go on how you read it, but then they just don't use the way that is kususu anymore. They just choose the one that the closest to the printed characters. And what kids in school learn is that how many stroke it is, what stroke come first, something like that. They don't teach you the Kuzushiji anymore. And that's how Kuzushiji slowly disappear from Japanese language system. So when you look in the textbook, this is elementary school textbook in Meiji 17 or 1884. So this is all hiragana except the part that is said daikyuka, daijiuka. So it looks like this. So they used to have all of the hentai kana to be in the textbook. But then right after the standardization, the textbook look like this. This is, I think it's printed in October 1900. So it's pretty much look like the books that we use today. Even they use the old style kanji or kyujitai, but still you can read it, most of it, comparing to the one that in Meiji period. So it's like a huge shift in the Japanese learning system. So when you try to read Kuzushiji, I have one recommendation. It's actually my personal opinion, but when you try to read it, you should treat these two types of characters separate problem. The first one is how you learn to read kanji, and another one is that how you learn to read hiragana or hentai kana. I didn't put katakana here because they don't write katakana in Kuzushiji. Katakana is just like a block, so that's how they write it. So there are two types of character that I want to state here. Is the first one kanji, and the second one is hentai kana. So let's look at the kanji first, because how you learn is pretty straightforward. So kanji, like in this slide, there's so many ways to write one kanji. There's not many way around it. What you have to do is you have to try to remember what it looks like, and then when it appears in the text, then you can read it. But one thing I will tell you is that when we read kanji, it's not just one characters. We read the whole text, and we have the character before that or after that. Just use everything around that characters as a hint for you to read. And sometimes they have furigana or ruby next to the characters. Then you can also use that to help you to read kanji. But the furigana is also written in hentaigana. So you have to learn how to read hiragana before you can use that furigana to read kanji. So when you read, this is the photo from when I was in a grad student. What we do is we just use dictionary to read the kanji. And when we find a character that we cannot read, we just open dictionary and then just read it one by one. It's very straightforward. But let me introduce you the dictionary first. These are two dictionaries that we use normally at school at Waseda. So these two dictionaries written by the same person, the same author. The red one is the one that we use, is a standard one that is a little bit big, Kuzushiji Recognition, but this one is cover both kanji and hiragana. So if you get this one, it will cover everything that you need. But the downside of this book is so heavy. If you don't mind about the weight of the book, then just get the red one. But then on the gold one on the right side, this one I think just published last year. So this one is Kanji Kuzushi Kata Chiten. Kanji Kuzushi Kata Chiten has only kanji. You don't have the hiragana in this book. And this book is quite small and it's very light. So if you have to go somewhere and you have to bring your dictionary, then just get the gold one. After some time, after you learn to read hiragana and you remember most of the things, then maybe you don't need it in the dictionary anymore. So gold one is enough. So when we read kanji, right, you may have the question like, okay, if I have one squiggling character that I cannot even read, how am I going to use the dictionary to look up for that characters, right? In modern Japanese, what we can do is maybe what most people do when we learn Japanese, that we just count the stroke, right? We count the stroke and then we look up in the dictionary and then we just look what the character is. But then in Kuzushiji, if you count the strokes, sometimes it's just one, right? Because they just write it in one stroke. They don't write it like separately, nicely. So what you can do is something like this. Social no Kuzushi kata is to try to remember a little bit like what the radical written in Kuzushiji. This book is for Japanese calligraphy and it tells you what the radical in the which part of the characters look like. Most people follow the rule, fortunately, but sometimes they don't, but you have to read with your own judgment. But most of the time, this can be the guide that you can use to read Kuzushiji. For example, on this, the cover, there is the kanji suki in the middle, right? And then these three characters, also all of them has suki radical, but when it's at the back of the character or at the front of the characters or at the lower part, these all look completely different. And that's where maybe you can try to remember or look up in the dictionary when you read kanji. But one thing that I have to tell you is that reading kanji is hard for everyone, even people in Edo period or even long times ago. So my academic advisor used to tell me that if you cannot read kanji, don't worry about it. Most people cannot read it either, but you have to know how you are going to use the dictionary or use other resources to try to help you to read that characters. So one thing when you learn to read kanji, one suggestion is not, it doesn't have to be like this, but on the CODS website, CODS is my work, the Center for Open Data in the Humanities. So in this website, we have the rank of the character occurrence in 1 million characters. This is the rank of the characters that appear in the books in Edo period. So you can see that the most character that is used in Japanese is not in this period, right? So it's happened like for 40,000 times among 1 million characters. But then you see that hiragana appears a lot. So when you learn, you can try to start learning from hiragana. And then when you go to kanji, the kanji that is used the most is koto. And then the second one is ichi, is one. And then you go to gyo or on, and then kono and deru. So if you learn kanji in the order of the appearance, then maybe you will see it in the books more than the other characters. But this is all up to your preference. But if you don't know where to start, just try to learn from the occurrence of the characters. What is the tool that we can use to read kanji? So the first one is Mojiso by Nara National Research Institute for Cultural Properties. This website, when you have a character you cannot read, you just crop that characters and then you drag the character in here in the square. And then when you click at the kaizetsu, and then the system will try to help you read that kanji for you. And another one is the online Kuzushiji Dictionary by Historiographical Institute, University of Tokyo, Shirohen Sancho. And this one, you can just type the kanji that you want to look, and then it will give you the result, like on the right side, like this. Okay, let's come to Hiragana. Hiragana in Kuzushiji is very special because we have something that's called hentai kana. When you look at this word, this is Hiragana word. This is 3 characters. And then how you read this word is just like this, is kokoro. So it doesn't look anything like the characters on the middle. This is a modern Japanese character, but this one is read as kokoro. That is because it came from the kanji furui, and then the iteration, and then just sendo noro, something like that. This character is called jibo, and then haha. So this is the idea that I really need you to remember. In modern Japanese, we don't have to remember what jibo hiragana is, but then in Kuzushiji, learning to remember jibo is the key to read hentai kana. So let's take a look at this. These are all like 4 kanji characters, and then it's just written in hiragana, so it's become like this. So this is a hentai kana that's derived from those characters. And this is the jibo that become the hiragana that we use today. So this one is kuroneko. And the character on top here is also the jibo, so the root or mother characters. When we look at one hiragana here, for example, this one, hiragana ha, there used to be so many ways to write many kanji that represent this hiragana ha. I put 4 characters in here, but this is not all. We have more characters to represent ha. And then in each character, the kanji character is called jibo, and then there are so many ways to write this hiragana. So basically, you have to remember the how it look like and try to use out of the context to help you to read it. And the book that I recommend you to use is this one. It said, 1週間で読める Kuzushiji. You can read Kuzushiji in 1 week, even though it took me so much time, like more than 1 week to finish this book. But this is very, very good. And it will teach you how to read hentai kana. And when you look at this page on the right side, when you write the modern hiragana in here, and then you transcribe it. But then in the left side, this is the jibo, because you also have to remember the jibo, like what character is this represents. So learning jibo and learning how to read is a way to learn how to read hentai kana. But if you are like a very digital person, like you don't want to do something so analog, you don't want to use a book, there is a Kuzushiji learning app, both on App Store and also Google Play. This one is called Kula. It will teach you how to read hentai kana, but the app is in Japanese. But you can use this app and then download it and learn how to read hentai kana or hiragana first. And the person who created this app, his name is Hashimoto Yuta. And he is also the creator of this project, the crowdsourced online transcription project, or Minna de Honkoku. Minna de Honkoku is the project that a lot of people online try to join, and then they help transcribing the same text at the same time. Let me show you what the system looks like. So in Minna de Honkoku, you have the transcription editor. So they have the text and the image that they want all of you to transcribe. What you have to do is that you just type down the transcription in the editor. If you cannot read some character, you can leave it blank. And you can also use the help from an AI model that can read like 1 character at a time. And I'm the one who built this AI model, so I will talk about it later. if you cannot read it, it's fine. Like you just read what you can read and then you just type it in the editor. And then one nice thing about Minna de Honkoku is that it's almost like SNS for transcribing Kuzushiji. You have the timeline, like who transcribed how many characters in what text. And then if you look at here, at the red part here, they said that Tensaku Kibo, right? So it means like, oh, I'm not very sure that if my transcription is correct or not. If anyone know Kuzushiji more than I do, please help me checking this. And most of the time, like people will just say Tensaku Kibo, like, okay, please help me to transcribe this. And then when someone help you transcribe, like correct what you already did, your work, something like that, and you get the notification. So it's really like Facebook for Kuzushiji transcription. And there are so many people joining this project. And then the transcription process is very, very fast. So until now, I have been talking about how you learn and what is Kuzushiji, why most people cannot read anymore. From this latter part, I will talk about machine learning and Kuzushiji recognition models that we created. So the first one is the Kuzushiji single character recognition or KuroNet. And the second one is the Kuzushiji multiple characters recognition or KuroNet. So let's start from what is machine learning, right? Machine learning is just a subset of AI, artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence is like conceptual thing that means the ability of machine to stimulate human behavior. This means like a machine can think and can make a judgment and can read and can recognize things like a human does, and that's the artificial intelligence. To be honest, we are not at the state yet. It's just the conceptual. They try to do it, but it's not that easy, you know, even to imitate what a human is trying to do. And then in the subset of artificial intelligence, we have machine learning. Machine learning is the ability of the machine to learn from the data without explicitly programmed. So basically what it's like is that we have the machine and then we just give a lot of data to it, and then the machine try to figure out what the data is or something like that. And then inside machine learning, there's the deep learning. Deep learning is just the deep layer of neuron. Neuron is very, very simple equation of a mathematics equation that they put one neuron, it's just a very short equation, and then they just stack it together to make it really deep. And that's why they call it deep learning. So another name of the deep learning is just deep neural network. Both KuroNet and KuGumaNet that we created use deep learning. So how machine learn from data is like this. When you have the training data, a lot of training data, I would say we need a lot of data. And for example, in this case, it's just like a cat image. We have a cat image. And then we build the machine learning model that take the data in it. And then the machine will try to figure out like what cat look like. For example, it has like a 2 eyes, 1 nose, and pointy ears, something like that. And then it will gather all of that feature and then create the prediction model. At the prediction model, when you give the data, the new data, something like this, and then the prediction model will try to predict what the picture it is. Okay, this is like a joke that I put the dog in here because this is what happens all the time. Like, artificial intelligence or machine learning are not 100%. It makes mistakes all the time, and that's what you have to know it. So even though like the best model, it may get to maybe 99 point something, but it will never be 100% because the training data doesn't represent the real world in everything, in every way. So the motivation for me to do this Kuzushiji recognition research is that something like this. This is a bookstore very close to my work. It's in Jimbocho. It's called Oyashobo. This store sells only like the book from Edo period or even earlier. There are like 3 million books and 1 billion historical documents preserved in Japan. So when I said 3 million books, it's not like one book costs like 3 million times, but it's, I would say like 3 million book set. So for example, like Nanso Satomi Kakken, which is Japanese literature, that's one book set, but inside that one set, there are like more than 100 books. So we have massive amount of the books that still preserved in Japan. And we have like 1 billion historical documents So what's the difference between books and a historical document? Books is something that is become a book, like maybe Tale of Genji, Makura no Soshi, Kokinshu, or something like that. It's become a book and it's read and it's reprint and publish and sell to people. But then historical document is something like the diary, letters, something that's personal use, and everything combined is what we just call it like a komonjo, historical documents. So there's a lot of them because Japanese people are really, really good at preserving things. But the problem is most of them are not read or examined because the number of people who can read Kuzushiji fluently is like 0.01% of the whole Japanese population. That's less than 10,000 people. And most of them are researchers. And when researchers read Kuzushiji, they always start from what they are interested in. For example, for me, I'm a Tale of Genji researcher. I would love to read a lot of things about Genji, but I will not try to read something like the record of the rice selling in Edo period or something like that. That's why the number of the book that is transcribed to modern Japanese is very limited. It's up to the researcher, like what books they want to read. But there's like a plenty of document that is not read today. And the problem is we lost historical documents from disaster all the time. This photo is from last year when the typhoon Hagibis hit Japan in October 2019. So we lost a lot of documents. For example, at the Kawasaki City Museum, we lost the whole collection room. There's something like this. It's so big and it's happened every single year in Japan. And they're trying to rescue these documents by asking people that please, if you find this historical document, don't throw it away. Please just give it to the museum or anywhere near you, and then we will try to rescue it. And this is something that happened every time, like after the disaster come. Because when people cannot read these documents, they don't know if it's important, if it's not important. Can I just throw it away, or should I just keep it like somewhere in my house? So how we preserve historical documents like this, the first thing that people will think of is that, okay, let's take picture of all of this, because at least if we have the image, then we have some backup. They just try to take photograph of each document. So even something happens to the real document, at least we have some backup. And that's what everyone is trying to do right now in Japan. But the thing is, when you try to take picture of all documents, like one page at a time, even at the CODH website, we have 3,126 books, and we already have over 600,000 images in our database for each page like that. But for somewhere like Tenri Central Library in Nara, in the whole library, they have over 20 million images in their archive. And this is only one library. And just imagine like how many libraries are there in Japan that's trying to do the same thing. So they try to take the photograph of each book. So we end up with something like this. A lot of pictures, like millions of pictures, but then there's no easy way to access to the content of the books, because even though you have the image, a lot of images, still, when you try to find what you want, you still have to look through it one by one. So that's why it's come to this question for me, that can we just use machine to do this? Like we have the document, can we just use the machine to transcribe it and get the text, and then we can do the text search from the text when we want to find something? And when you look at this image, you know that the answer is yes. Actually, we can use the machine to do this. But reading Kuzushiji from machine is not that easy, because Kuzushiji is hard by itself because it's written in the main or is connected together. It's hard to do the segmentation, like to cut where the character start, where the character end. But another thing that makes Kuzushiji hard is that so many characters look similar. For example, these are completely different characters, but if you cannot read Kuzushiji and you just look at it at one glance, you may think that, oh, this is the same character, but actually it's not. And then another problem is that the opposite is also the same. Kuzushiji is hard because the same character don't even look the same. So there are so many ways to write one character. So there are so many variations. There are so many type of character that you can read. And as you already know that kanji has almost unlimited number. When we create Kuzushiji recognition model, the number of the kanji affect a lot in the computing power and the algorithm that we use. So that's why Kuzushiji recognition is so hard. But then after we build this system, one good thing that happened is that we get a lot of media attention from around the world. It's very nice for me to see people written my name in all different languages. So this is something that's very rare, that people start to interested in like using artificial intelligence to help preserving a historical document. So this KuroNet project is actually a very, very successful one. So as I mentioned before, when we train the machine to read Kuzushiji, we need the data, lots of data. So the data set that we use is called Kuzushiji dataset. This dataset was created by the National Institute of Japanese Literature. So let me show you what the dataset look like. It looks like this. Kuzushiji dataset is content of a lot of image from each book. Like in the dataset, we have 44 books from Edo period, most of them woodblock printed. So 41 books is a print, and then 3 books is handwritten. So the reason that the handwritten book is still very small number, because when we started from the woodblock because it may be easier to develop the model, like algorithm, like machine learning model from that, and then we can go to the harder version of the data set. So in the data set, they have like one page like this of the characters, and then it's not just the text of the transcription. In the dataset, we have something like an Excel file like this. It's a CSV file actually. So the image is like a file name. It's just a file name. And then each characters, we label it by Unicode, because that's how we represent the kanji characters in the code in one way. And then we have the bounding box, the box around each character, like where it starts, where it stops. And so it's a X, Y, width and height. So this is represent the pixel of in the image, like how big the character is and then where is it in the page. And then you can see that sometimes the characters overlap pretty badly, like this one, Ma and She, and it's just on top of each other like that. So, and this is basically the data set that we use to train KuroNet and also KokumaNet. So, okay, let me show you how KokumaNet works. KokumaNet is very straightforward. When you go to CODH website, you open like one book, and then how you use KokumaNet is just that you draw square around the character that you cannot read and just click on it, and the machine learning model will try to read it for you. Let's take a look at the sample like this. So for example, this character, I just crop it, and then the model will give you the result like this. So when you see the result, there's the character in front of that, and then the number. This number represents the probability that the model thinks this character is what. So the first one is here, it said that Uta, but actually this character is not Uta, it's Yoku, so it's Hoshi. So actually it's the second one. So you have to know that when you use this kind of model, it's not 100%. That's why we give you 5 choices that you can read, and then you can choose the one that you think is correct. Okay, so then let's take a look at another character. So you can just close it, and then the box is on the top right that you can use to crop like this. For example, this character is actually Hiragana. It's come from Chibo is Nakare. Something like this, but this one is said, okay, this is root for 60%. My confidence is like 60% that this character is root, something like that. And yeah, you can use this as a guide to read Kuzushiji. And then let's go to another big one, is KuroNet. KuroNet is multiple characters recognition. Let me show you this. So how KuroNet works is actually it uses object detection algorithm. So we use the residual unit. You don't have to know what it is, but it's just like one algorithm try to look for what they are in the picture. So UNet used to be used for biomedical image segmentation. For example, when you have an MRI image and then you have a lot of cell and bone and something like that, when you try to do the separate of the each cell or something, and then you have to label it, and that's where the UNet algorithm came from. And the first idea that we had is that maybe Kuzushiji document is not very different from that. We have to separate each character from each other, and then we have to find like what character it is on the page. And that's why we start by using UNet. Object detection algorithm is something that they normally use in something like self-driving car. So when there's a camera, and then when you look at the street, there's pedestrian, like where's the human, where's the object, and where's the building. So it's pretty much the same idea. So what KuroNet actually does is that it looks at each pixel on the image. So what it does is that it will look at each pixel and then decide whether this pixel contains characters or not. So the result is come in probability. If the probability is high enough that is more than the threshold that we set, and when it decides that, okay, this pixel has the character, and it will go to the next step, like, okay, then what character it is. And when we do that, we get the modern characters that transcribe into modern Japanese like this. I will not talk about KuroNet in detail too much because it's a machine learning paper, but if you are interested in KuroNet system and how it works, we wrote 2 papers that you can download online and is open access. So what KuroNet can do now is that it can transcribe Kuzushiji page in 2 seconds per page. But actually it's 1.5 seconds, but when it's online, maybe it can take up to 5 seconds because of the internet connection or how crowded that people are using the system right now. And the thing is, you may have the questions that, okay, if we already successful at building the model, building the software, then where can I download it? Where can I use it? But it's not that simple, because where is the software? Kuzushiji recognition model is very, very computationally expensive. That means you need a really good computer to do this. So it won't work on personal notebook or something like that, not on MacBook, on like Windows or anything. This is basically the photo from my desk at work. My computer at work costs like a few million yen. So that's why it works. But then even you get the computer that you can run the Kuzushiji recognition model, you still need to know how to run Python code on Ubuntu terminal. It's not Windows, it's not Mac, it's Linux. And then set up the environment, and also dependencies are not easy. So basically, if you don't know how to do the programming or how to set up computers, using KuroNet is still very, very hard. So we come up with this idea like this. So can we just set up the machine, the server, so anyone can use the machine learning on the server? So when user has an image, they just send the request to the server, and then the server will do recognition for them and then give the result later. This one is good, but the thing is, you have to have like Kuzushiji document at your hand, or you have to have the picture of it. So some people have it, some people don't have it. So this model was created in 2019, so it's just last year. But the first step that we try to do is that we just want to make the system work for most people already. So that's why we do it like this. We build the KuroNet service on top of IIIF Curation Viewer, and then send data to the server and then give the result. So IIIF is a standard framework for museum and library that used to provide the image, to show the image for the user online. And lots of museum and library in Japan and all over the world start using this framework. So we think that if the museum has the document that you want to read, and then if you just use it through IIIF Curation Viewer, which is available on the CODS website, then you can use the KuroNet service to transcribe the Kuzushiji for you. So if you want to use KuroNet service on CODS website, it's pretty straightforward. Any books in the book list here will have the link to KuroNet Kuzushiji Recognition Service. It's in Japanese. We will translate the website in the English soon, but yeah, we still don't have time to do that. But when you click at here, then you can use the transcription service right away. But if you want to use document from other website that is not from CODS, like maybe Harvard or any Stanford University or something like that, then the first thing that you have to check is whether the images or the books is in IIIF format. The easiest way to find this is that you just look at the IIIF logo on the website. something like this. This one is from National Diet Library, and you see that it has the IIIF logo, and then the most important thing is called IIIF manifest. In here, it's like a URL. What you have to do is you have to drag the link into KuroNet viewer. I will show you how to do it. So the list of the digital libraries in IIIF format in Japan, maybe there's more, but this one is major one. The first one is by the National Institute of Japanese Literature, and then the second one is from digital collections of the Keio University, and then National Diet Library, and of course CODS website. But one thing I have to tell you is that Waseda Kotenseki database is not in IIIF format. It's not in the IIIF yet. Waseda has so great collections that I really like, but too bad that you cannot use the KuroNet service at the moment. Okay, let's take a look at the video how KuroNet service works. So I give you the link in the slide that can go to KuroNet, Kuzushiji Recognition viewer. So the viewer is look like this. It's just like a blank page that has nothing in it. And then you just go to the website of the book that you want, and then you just find the IIIF manifest link. What you have to do is just you click on it and hold the mouse and then just drag it to the viewer like this. When you just drop the link here, the book will be loaded automatically. Let's make it bigger a little bit. I just choose any random page like this. And then what you have to do is you have to click on the small square on the top right, and then just drag the square around the whole page that you want to transcribe like this. The thing is, even though the page is in like a dual page on the both sides, you have to crop the page, just one page at a time. The reason that we do it like this, because if the image is bigger, then it will be even more computational expensive for the server. So just do it one page at a time, like this. And after you crop it, everything after this, you just click on that, and then it will take you to the recognition service, and you just click like Jikko or run, and it will just do it for you. So after that, it's pretty straightforward, and then you click at the kandan, and then you will get the transcription like this. You can make it bigger, or you can like move the characters like to the side of the characters, or move on the left and right, and then change the opacity of the characters any way that you want. And you probably see that some characters cannot be transcribed. This is because like sometimes the character is too small, the model cannot see. Sometimes it's too light, and that is harder to read. So if the probability doesn't reach the threshold that we set, then it will not appear in the transcription. So the final thing is like, what is the limitation of Kuzushiji recognition model? I will go through this very, very fast. The first thing is that the model was trained on the woodblock printed book from Edo period. So the accuracy will be lower when you try to transcribe handwritten documents, especially from other eras. One thing that I have to tell you is that Japanese language in the history, in the classical Japanese, is not fixed like a modern Japanese. It's changed after time, because Heian period to now is like 1,000 years. The characters change all the time. The number of the jibo that they used to have in Heian period is not the same as the jibo as in the Edo period. So they use the same jibo, but the number is decreased a lot, and the number of characters decrease over time. And then another thing is that the model cannot transcribe the characters that are too rare. As I mentioned before, the deep learning, we need a lot of data to transcribe each characters. So if the characters appear like once or twice in the whole million characters, that is not enough for the model to learn to transcribe it. And then the third one is that the model cannot transcribe the characters that it never seen before, which means if the characters never appear in the dataset, the model cannot read it. And then the first one is that we try to solve this problem by increasing the data. It may help solving, but at the same time, the model will need even more computing power and more time to recognize each characters. And this is a problem that we have to deal with all the time. So the future of the Kuzushiji recognition model is that how to solve most problems, we need more data. But then if we need more data, we need more computing power. And maybe we can solve it by create a different algorithm that maybe is use less power, or we can separate the model into smaller model, but then still it will take more time to do recognition. And then it may get more accuracy, but can the accuracy compensate with the time? For example, the KuroNet right now, the accuracy is like 80 to 90% already. Even though we give it more time or more computing power, maybe the accuracy will increase 1% or 2% or something like that. Do you think that is something that we should compensate with the time and then the power that we use? And then the biggest problem is that how to make this model easier for people to use in the limited resources. For example, we get email from old people in Japan all the time. Like just one email that we got maybe a few months ago, there's a man that he's like in his 70 or 80, he sent email to us and say, oh, I want to use your Kuzushiji system, but my computer is not good enough. I'm not sure if I can do it. So most people who want to use Kuzushiji Recognition system, they are like humanities researcher and maybe a lot of old people and people who is not researcher. How can we make the system very easy to access for these people as well? And this is the thing that we have to think and we have to solve in the future. So I will end here. Thank you so much for listening.
Can we start with this basic issue, but very important? What is Hiragana and what is Kuzushiji? Because often we hear these used somewhat interchangeably. Could you tell us the difference between Hiragana and Kuzushiji, and when is it appropriate to use each of those terms?
So Kuzushiji is something, is a cursive Japanese in the in the bigger picture. So when we say it, Kuzushiji, it includes both kanji and hiragana, right? But when we say about Hiragana, that's only hiragana. So when we say Kuzushiji, is kanji and Hiragana, and when we say Hiragana, is hiragana only. Yeah.
Thank you. And then one related question, when we're talking about stroke order, there was a question about whether that's always uniform or if there's variations in stroke order. And so how does that impact your finding, Kuzushiji?
Well, in the stroke order, most people who are like educated to enough to copy the books in a pre-modern time, they always like write in the correct order. But something like after we have been doing a research in Kuzushiji for a while, most of the time, for example, for some book that we read that's written in Edo period, sometimes people don't even understand the character itself. They just try to copy it that look similar to the original one. So you can think about something like this. It's like a foreigner try to copy hiragana on the paper, you know. You can imagine, like, so it's looks similar to, okay, maybe it is a hiragana that we think it is, but actually it's not. So it's not always that the person who copied the book can read that kanji every time. So most of the time, the stroke order will be correct, but maybe 10% of the time it will be like that.
The next question is related to learning how to read Kuzushiji, and this idea right now, you've taken us from the basic resources we can use, including dictionaries. And the question is, how might, I think this is something you have quite a bit of experience with yourself, how might calligraphy play a part in that, or even the production of waka? Would it help to be able to learn to practice calligraphy as part of learning how to deduce Kuzushiji? Would it improve your proficiency? And maybe you can tell us a little bit about your own journey with that, because experience.
Yeah. So that's I didn't add it in the slide, yeah. But about calligraphy, it definitely helped. The thing is, when you learn calligraphy, there's two types of calligraphy. Actually, there are many types. But then the first calligraphy that they learn in like elementary school is a kanji calligraphy, right? So they just write in kanji. But the calligraphy that I learned is called kana shodo. So I start from kana, I start from hiragana, and then go to Kuzushiji right away. So I didn't learn how to write normal kanji in kaisho, and then it's just go to hiragana, what I need right away. But then learning definitely helped, because you know my idea when I start learning calligraphy is that if you can write it, you can read it, right? So yeah, because when I was in my master degree and I started learning Kuzushiji, I failed the Kuzushiji test, and then I got an F in my transcript in in the master degree. And then I just decided I need to find a way to learn. But luckily, I'm in Japan, so there's a lot of calligraphy class that I could go to, and then I just learned how to write each hiragana. So they start from writing hiragana in the normal modern hiragana, and then just go to the variation of the henkaigana, and then go to kanji character. It definitely helped, because when you look at the document, you can see where the stroke come from, like on the left, on the right, or from the up to the bottom, or when they like try to correct something, you can see the stroke more precise than the person who didn't do calligraphy. But I think it's a little bit hard to find a class to do it in outside Japan, right? But and another thing is that when we write calligraphy, what they care is about like the beauty of the characters, right? It's not like when you write Kuzushiji, you just copy it, and then maybe sometimes you care about how beautiful it is. If you have like expensive paper, then you will try to write it nicely. But if you just want the copy of the book, sometimes it's not. So it's not always beautiful in the Kuzushiji documents. But one thing that I have to tell you is that if you want to find a weird character, like a specific characters, like you should look at the wakashu, any poem anthology, like a kokinshu or kokin wakashu or something like that, and they will try to use like a character that not normally used in other books, because they want to make it like more beautiful. And that's how you learn Kuzushiji, from like a poem anthology.
Great. Now I'll turn to some of the platforms and data sets and other materials you've introduced to us. So two related questions. Is it possible to download the whole Kuzushiji data set and to work with it? And then where would you go to download that? And then I'll ask a follow-up.
Yeah. Okay. And
does the honkoku.org provide downloadable data sets of it, for machine learning purposes?
Not yet. I mean, like for CODH, we have the Kuzushiji dataset that you can download. The whole 1 million characters is in the Excel file, so you can play, and then you can work on something like statistic on it, because you can create the graph and something like that, right? It's very fun to do that, I can tell you. So you can just go to the CODH website, and on the top page, there is a link to Kuzushiji dataset. You can download it. But for Minna de Honkoku, I don't think they released the dataset yet. And there's what they have is the text and then the image of the text. So even though you have that text, you cannot use it to train a machine learning model yet. But Hashimoto-san is my collaborators, and we are trying to use that data to increase the data for KuroNet to train on it. So I think the data will be available later.
And is the KuroNet source code, source code available on?
Yeah, the KuroNet source code is, it will be open source, but it's not open source yet, because to be honest, the reason that we haven't released it yet is because it's so messy. On the backside, I have to clean the data first, but I still don't have that much time to do it. But we will eventually release the code as an open source on GitHub.
Great. And then some questions related to transcription. Where is the transcription stored? And then is there a potential to tie it with larger knowledge graphs to do text encoding, marking places, names, and that sort of thing without losing that link to the image?
Actually, I'll tell you this. When we do transcription on the server, the result that we get is in JSON file. So it's like the file with the Unicode and then XY, Unicode, XY, something like that is on the back side of the IIIF creation viewer. And we have the text editor that you can download the transcription text. At the moment, it's still beta, because, you know, this problem is harder than most people think. The layout of the Kuzushiji text is very rare, because they write in, sometimes they don't even write in the straight column. They just write it like in the curve or something like that. And to decide whether where the character go to what the next character to come is very, very hard for computer to decide. And we're still solving this problem a lot. But yeah, you can download the text, but I'm not sure about the JSON file. I have to check that. But we can make it available if people who want to use it really need it. We can just add one link. That's not hard to do. Yeah.
And then two IIIF related questions. One is there any possibility in the future of making documents that are not IIIF compatible right now for it to be able to decipher those? And then is it possible for people, how difficult is it if you have documents that you would want to make into IIIF compatible? What would that involve? It's a hard thing to do if you have a set of materials.
Okay, so these two questions. The first one is that will it be available for people for the image that is not in IIIF format? I would say yes. We are working on it right now, and it will be open, so you can upload the image, and then you can just use the KuroNet transcription service. That will be a lot easier. But one thing that we have to think about is that right now we have one server and the GPU. But if people keep uploading the image, then the server will crash. We have to find a way to queuing the user, so we still can keep our resource working all the time. And then another problem is that it is easy to change the image into a IIIF format. I would say that if you are experienced with IIIF, it's very, very easy. You can use many tools to do that. But if you are not familiar with IIIF, it's quite complicated. So yeah, if you can find someone who can deal with IIIF, that will be the easiest way.
And then a related question, is there a specific programming language that's helpful in terms of engaging with digital humanities resources like KuroNet? You mentioned Python. Would that be the most useful thing to work on, or what would you recommend?
Well, I think Python is very easy to learn. I mean, comparing to other languages. And then if someone wants to start doing programming, I will recommend them to use Python. And Python can serve a lot of things if you want to do something in machine learning, definitely Python is the language you have to know. And for digital humanities, for example, something like statistics, and then any a text encoding, maybe I still recommend Python. So just choose one. And there's so many online courses that's available. One course that I would recommend is from Udemy, because Udemy is the course is, if you find the coupon code, the cost can be very, very cheap, maybe 1,000 yen, maybe just $9 or something like that. It's very, very cheap. And if you want to start doing something in digital humanities, just try to take one course and learn it. Try it by yourself, and you can decide whether you want to proceed in this field or not. Yeah.
Does KuroNet allow full text output in order to adjust the Kuzushiji readings that might not be correct? Is it possible to adapt that? I think you answered that in part already, but you can tinker with words, right?
Yeah. There's the text editor in the KuroNet that you can draw the line, and then you can link which character come to the next character, something like that. And after you do that, you can copy and paste the text from the result of KuroNet, and you can just copy it and put on the Microsoft Word or something, and then just correct the text that come from the system. Yeah.
And then two questions related to differences in periods and then problems that you might encounter in a manuscript or a woodblock print text. Does KuroNet recognize typos by the author, and would it correct that, or would it just note the mistakes?
Okay, so about the typo, actually we got these questions a lot. We don't try to correct the author, because actually the typo by the author is a really good clue when we do the research in historical document, because in the modern Japanese, if you can read the text, it's fine. But then in the pre-modern Japanese, when author make mistake, and one book makes mistake, and then the next book also make the same mistake, that's the hint that we can get go back to where the original come from, who wrote this, or something like that. So it's very, very important information that we want to keep it in the text, even it's transcribed.
Does the algorithm process with manuscripts or calligraphy versus printed or woodblock print, does it differ in terms of how it reads that?
It's not different. It's read the same because we mix the data and handwritten and the printed at the same time. But the amount of the printed data we still have is still very, very low comparing to a woodblock print. So we have to increase the data to match that, and it will do better in terms of like a handwritten recognition. Yeah.
Great. And then related question in terms of periods. Does it differ so significantly when we move from Edo period Kuzushiji to Meiji that the content would have trouble, the software would have trouble with the latter in terms of Meiji materials, or is it able to handle both?
It can handle both actually. Meiji is very close to Edo, and the period is not that different. So in Edo and Meiji is not the problem for KuroNet at all. The problem is that anything older than that, for example, Heian, Kamakura, Nambokujo, something like that, and the KuroNet will have hard time recognize those characters because some character is not used in Edo period, is not shown in the data set, and how they write it is a little bit different. You know, like some famous Japanese literature professors, sometimes when they look at the document, they can just tell what eras come from by looking at the characters that's written on the text. I still cannot do that, but yeah, that's how different between the era is that. So anything newer than KuroNet is fine, but anything older, it will maybe struggle to do that. But one thing that we don't try to solve that problem is that, you know, like when humans try to transcribe the historical document, they start from something very, very important first. So if they find something new that's super important, for example, new set of the Tale of Genji or something like that, and then all the researcher will just go there and then help transcribe it very, very fast. So there's no need to use the machine to do that, right? So a human will just try to do that. So the more important the text is, the human will just go there and do it. We don't need the machine to do that. But something that came from like a warehouse of some people from Edo period, they don't know there's like a big pile of the box that full of a character that no one want to read. And I think that's where the AI and machine learning should come in and try to help them read. At least they can organize what the document it is, something like that.
Great. I'll just forward two final questions before we wrap up. Can you point us to where we can try out KuroNet? And I know we'll follow up with materials for everyone as well, but where does one go to access that? There were some questions related to that.
Okay, so KuroNet is the same as KuroNet. It's on IIIF creation viewer. So when you go to any like the book list in the CODH website, or even you want to use like something from KO or National Data Library, any the viewer that we have the default on CODH website is for KuroNet, but for KuroNet you have to use KuroNet viewer. So you don't need any special link for to use KuroNet. It's default on any books that is on IIIF in CODH website. Yeah.
Great, thank you. And then just a final question. How can we learn about the future initiatives that are being undertaken with Kuzushiji or your future talks on this? How can we follow what you're doing? What's the best means of doing that?
So the best way is to follow CODH Twitter. So it's just at ROIS_CODH, and then we always have the event and everything coming up. And actually we are having another event. Let me show you. Okay, so we are going to have like the 12 CODH seminar. This one is online, and it will probably on the YouTube Live or Zoom webinar. I'm not sure yet, but this one is about the AI for culture from Japanese art to anime. As you can see that there's a Japanese art, like a pictorial scroll, images, and then the next one is anime. This is a data set that we use machine learning to generate it, and it will be like, it's not a transcription, but it's about the generative model for anime and also the Premodern Japanese art. It will be on like the 5th of August at from 6 p.m. JST, the time will be quite hard, but this one is free to register, and it's online, and it's all in English. We have the speaker from Google and also Preferred Network, so they are both very famous machine learning researcher, and we will discuss about like what can we use like machine learning on this type of datasets as well. So this is our upcoming event. Yeah. So great. You can go to CODS website for more information.